to come as a community and to ask those questions, um, where a lot of other places don't feel like a place we can be vulnerable and do that and to show up as ourselves and to really try to dig in together as a community. So that's what this is all about. So, my name is Janelle Robinson. I am the co-chair of the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Committee with Nicole Burke. I am also the wellness coordinator here. Nicole, do you want to say hi and we can get started?
Hi, everybody. My name is Nicole Burke. I am a placement specialist at Nonotuck, and I am also the co-chair for the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging Committee. And I appreciate everyone coming out to our events that we have. And I hope you enjoy today.
So we have two videos for us to watch today. So we're going to watch one. The first one's about, I think, 17 minutes. So we're going to watch one together, just kind of get comfortable, take it in. We'll have some time for discussion, and then we will watch the second video and have some time for discussion. That way we have a nice balance today of really kind of like taking in information and then being able to process it and discuss it together. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen. There we go. All right, Nicole, I can see you, so you give me a heads up if you can hear and see this.
Well, hello everybody. Today we're here at the National Civil Rights Museum in Memphis, Tennessee with our amazing tour guide, Ryan Jones. How are you today?
I'm well, and yourself?
Good to meet you.
All right.
Well, what do we have here? We're starting out, and this is the tunnel you come in, right?
Yeah, this is basically a condensed timeline of what you would have seen in the original Civil Rights Museum, which opened here in 1991. Beginning in the year 1619, 20 African slaves were brought to this country in Jamestown, Virginia, and they were sold into what we call slavery. And once they would do this, many African Americans and some white abolitionists would try and fight against the oppression of slavery. They would take some civil approaches and they would take some violent approaches. Some of the most important leaders during this time was Mr. Frederick Douglass, Miss Harriet Tubman, and the radical Nat Turner of 1831.
Well, they saw that it was wrong right from the bat, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
What are some of the things going on here? And we have President Lincoln, huh?
Absolutely. In 1861, 13 southern states no longer wanted to be a part of what we call the United States of America. So they decided to fight a war, which was known as the American Civil War. And Lincoln wants to do something that no other president had done before this time. So on January the 1st, 1863, exactly 150 years ago this year, he issues the Emancipation Proclamation, which is supposed to free the slaves in this country, which in fact is not free one slave, because this was only a military document and only a constitutional amendment could completely abolish slavery.
Yeah, still a lot of work to be done at that
Absolutely.
point. Then we move down this way, and we get into, the 1900s, which things weren't right yet. Things still weren't right.
In 1954, Thurgood Marshall and the NAACP said that children should be able to go to the same schools in this country. So on Monday, May the 17th, 1954, the Brown versus Board of Education ruled that segregation in public schools was unconstitutional. This was the first major landmark decision in the civil rights movement, and this is what led to so many of those marches and demonstrations that Dr. King and many more other civil rights organizations began to be involved with. Yeah, picking up off of that momentum was Miss Rosa Parks actually decided not to give up a seat on an Alabama bus to a white man, and this sparked the Montgomery bus boycott, which is where we see a 26-year-old Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. first show his face in the civil rights movement. And so for 381 days, African Americans decide not to walk. They decide to walk, use carpool and black-owned taxis to get back and forth to their destinations. 381 days after that, the Supreme Court ruled that segregation in these buses was unconstitutional. And this was the first major accomplishment and achievement of the civil rights movement and of Dr. King as a civil rights leader.
But it started things going, didn't it?
Absolutely.
A lot of things hurting people, and a lot of things where, there's a lot of riots and challenges for people, weren't there?
Many atrocities. Perhaps the biggest and turning point of the civil rights movement was exactly 50 years ago in 1963. Dr. King leads a campaign in Birmingham known as Project Confrontation. And this is where you see those infamous footages of little innocent children, 4 years old to 17 years old, old, being attacked by police dogs and German shepherds and water hoses. And this was also where Dr. King delivers his most famous speech, the I Have a Dream speech, on August the 28th of 1963, which is where he says, I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
We're getting there too.
After the civil rights movement won many of these battles with President Kennedy proposing the civil rights legislation, which later becomes the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and gives African Americans the right to vote under federal law with the Voting Rights of 1965, Dr. King is going from being not just a civil rights leader, but he's going to try and be a human rights leader. And mainly in Memphis, Tennessee in 1968, African American sanitation workers were only receiving $1.04 an hour. So Dr. King decides to come here to march on behalf of the striking sanitation workers. And it's here he leads a march. And this march turns out to be the only march that Dr. King leads in his entire tenure as a civil rights leader that turns out to be a violent march. So he's forced to retreat from Memphis, and he comes back on Wednesday, April the 3rd, and he stays at the historic Lorraine Motel, which is where the Civil Rights Museum stands today.
That's where we are today.
Going into the rest of that day, on April the 3rd, Dr. King delivers his second most famous speech. And he quotes and says, like anyone, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place, but I'm not concerned about that now because I've been to the mountaintop and I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. On that very night, that was the very last speech that Dr. King would have delivered in his short 39 years of life.
Wow, and on this tour, we can actually see that spot.
Yeah, and that's what we'll actually take you to right next, and then we'll go and talk about the last moments and the last day of Dr. King's life.
Wow, it's amazing. We're looking forward to it.
All right.
Here we go. Well, Ryan, looks like we're in a pretty special place right here.
Yeah, we're at the real Lorraine Motel.
Okay.
In the 50s and 60s, many famous African-American celebrities would stay here at the Lorraine Motel, such as Sam Cooke, Otis Redding, Aretha Franklin, and Ray Charles. However, the most famous celebrity was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and Dr. King returned to the city of Memphis in April of 1968. He was placed in room 306, and we'll discuss those tragic events that took place on that day as we walk on the balcony and stand where Dr. King
There's
stayed.
two cars here.
Sure.
And what's the significance?
These are 1964 and 1967 Cadillacs and Dodges, and these cars were replicas of the actual models that were here at the time of the fatal assassination. So we kind of had these cars put here to create the effect of how it was in 1968 here at the Lorraine Motel.
Give you the vibe and the feel, huh?
Definitely.
There's a wreath here.
The wreath was put here to show exactly where Dr. King was standing on the balcony when he was hit by the assassin's bullet. So we commemorated the wreath here right exactly at this exact moment.
Wow. Well, let's go on up and check it out.
All right, let's go.
All right.
And what's really good about this is that this is the original frame. Nothing has been changed at the Lorraine Motel's frame since 1968.
So we're touching history right here.
And now we're going to room 306 here at the Lorraine Motel. This is where Dr. King was placed with Ralph Abernathy on the afternoon of Wednesday, April 3rd, 1968. On the following day, after Dr. King delivered that famous I've Been to the Mountaintop speech, Dr. King and some of his associates, such as Ralph Abernathy, Andrew Young, and the Reverend Samuel Billy Kyles of Memphis, were getting ready to go and eat dinner at Reverend Kyles' home that night. Dr. King steps outside the balcony, and he stands right here. And he's getting ready to go downstairs with some of his colleagues. And one of the first people that he's addressed is Reverend Jesse Jackson from Chicago. Jesse Jackson says, Doc, it's getting cold outside. You should go and grab a jacket. Dr. King is standing exactly in this position, and he says, all right, I'll get a coat. At that exact moment, the fatal shot rings out. Dr. King is hit in the right jaw and neck area. It pierces his jugular vein and spinal cord, and it lodges in his left shoulder blade. Dr. King falls wounded right in this area that we see here on the balcony. At the time of the assassination, Reverend Ralph Abernathy runs inside of room 306. And on the very same exact telephone that's in the room right now, he's trying to phone the switchboard operator. Well, she's not answering her phone. The switchboard operator was Miss Lori Bailey, the co-owner of the Lorraine Motel. She's run outside of her office because she hears a loud noise ring, and she looks up on the balcony and sees what happens to Dr. King, and she goes into a seizure and has a heart attack on the spot. She dies 4 days later from her injuries. Dr. King was taken from the balcony to St. Joseph's Hospital, where he was later pronounced dead at 7:05 p.m. And riots and violence erupted throughout the entire United States of America in the wake and aftermath of Dr. King's assassination, with the exception of Indianapolis. In April of 1968, Senator Robert F. Kennedy was running for president of the election year of 1968, and he has to break the news to an all African-American community about Dr. King's death. And he gives a speech that night saying that Dr. King would have wanted this community and this country to remain peaceful, being the nonviolent man that he was.
Wow, and it's all coming back now. That's nice. They're revamping everything here. And you know, the thing that I've noticed too is that you guys are constantly upgrading this museum. Yes,
definitely. After November of 2012, the National Civil Rights Museum is undergoing a major extensive renovation campaign, which is what we're going to do is that we're just going to update the technology, more digital interaction. We're going to have many more stories told about the civil rights struggle that goes a lot more in depth than Dr. King, Rosa Parks, Frederick Douglass. And we're just going to give a place for children and the youth and all people, tourists all over the world, can come here and learn about this dark history of American history.
So we got to remember.
Absolutely. In order to know where you're going, you have to know where you've been.
Wow, amazing.
First, we're going to go into the who murdered Dr. King. And one of the first sides is James Earl Ray was the lone gunman. James Earl Ray was an escaped convict from the Missouri State Penitentiary. And when he goes to Atlanta, Georgia, he's going to kill Dr. King because it's said by the FBI that he was a follower of George Wallace. When Dr. King publicly denounces Wallace running for 37th president of this country, he says that we have to take this man out. So he purchases this 1965 Mustang for $1,900, and he drives to Atlanta. He buys a map circling Dr. King's home, his job, and his church, the Ebenezer Baptist Church, which is still in Atlanta today. When he realizes that Dr. King is not in Atlanta, he's here in the city of Memphis. So he goes in that Mustang and he drives from Atlanta to Birmingham. When he's in Birmingham, he buys 2 rifles. The first rifle, he takes it back, saying that it was the wrong size. Whatever happens to that rifle, we have no idea to this day. He takes a second rifle and he brings that rifle from Birmingham into Memphis, and he checks in the Young Memorial Rooming House on the day of the assassination. And you have to keep in mind that on April the 4th of 1968, it was front page of the Memphis Commercial Appeal newspaper that not only was Martin Luther King Jr. in Memphis, he was at the Lorraine Motel downtown. Not only was he at the Lorraine, he was in room 306.
And is this the actual hotel?
This is the actual Young Memorial Rooming House, boarding house. And what we're about to go and look at now is the room that James Earl Ray allegedly stayed in, and the bathroom that he allegedly fired the fatal shot from, under the alias of John Willard.
This is amazing. This is getting deep now.
It is.
So let's go check that out. This is the actual room.
Yeah.
Recreation of the actual.
Yeah. This is
or is this the actual room?
Yeah, this is the actual room of room 5B from the Young Memorial Rooming House. It's said that James Earl Ray, under the alias of John Willard, checks into this room so that he could be very close to see where Dr. King was going to be, so that he could try and maybe get a fatal shot. So Ray is said to have left this bedroom and take that second rifle that he purchased in Alabama, and he comes into this bathroom and he purchased himself into this bathtub. And this
literally in the bathtub, and this is the actual window.
This is the actual window where the FBI said the fatal shot was fired that murdered Martin Luther King Jr.
Whoa. Now, is this the same position?
Same position. This bathroom is in the exact same position and left, as you can see, intact with where it was.
So now which way is the Lorraine from here? Is it?
It's that way.
So he kind of stuck out the window and shot that way.
Absolutely. And we put these windows here to show the exactly type of shot that Ray would have gotten from this area. Right.
So as we look through, we can see the balcony, and that's exactly where the bathtub, right on the other side of that wall. And as you look through, we can see it's pretty much a straight shot.
Pretty much. So after this happens, Dr. King is mortally wounded on the balcony. Ray leaves the bathroom and he goes into his room and puts the rifle into a bundle, and he runs downstairs and runs outside, and he kind of panics, and he's thinking, if I have this weapon in my possession when I make my getaway, that's it, they're gonna get me. So he abandons the weapon. This weapon has his fingerprint on it, right outside of what is the gift shop of the National Civil Rights Museum today. And he leaves that Mustang in Atlanta, gets on a plane, and flies from Atlanta to Toronto, from Toronto to London, from London to Portugal, and Portugal back to London before he's finally captured 65 days after the assassination of Dr. King.
Kind of crazy.
Absolutely. It doesn't stop there. Ray then is extradited back to Memphis, Tennessee, and he retains an attorney that says, James, there's far too much circumstantial evidence saying that you were the only person involved in the assassination of Dr. King. So if you plead guilty and waive your right to trial, maybe you'll receive a small punishment, because at this time in this country, in the Deep South, if you were white accused of killing an African-American, you will receive no time at all, maybe not even be arrested. So if you take a plea bargain, maybe you'll get off. He's thinking he's going to get a light sentence and return. He pleads guilty and he receives 99 years in the state penitentiary, which is where he dies at the year of 1998 with liver cancer.
Wow. Wow, so he got what he got, didn't he?
Sure. I mean, a lot of people suggest that Martin Luther King Jr. was murdered by James Earl Ray due to the circumstantial evidence. However, 85% of the American population believes that Martin Luther King Jr. was not assassinated by James Earl Ray. No one said that they saw James Earl Ray in this bathroom. 45 minutes went by, and from 5:45 to 6:20, 6:25, no one said that they saw a man that even resembled Ray in that bathroom. Instead, there were 6 eyewitnesses in the Lorraine Motel parking lot, and when the fatal shot rang out, they all claimed to have seen a man in this area right below us.
Out on the grass?
Out on the grass. This was a grassy and brushy area.
We can see right through here. There's the grass, and there's still a good, clean shot.
And this is kind of like the Memphis grassy knoll, as you'll see in Dallas at the Sixth Floor Museum. 6 witnesses said that they saw a man with a rifle and a puff of smoke in this area, running and jumping off of that retaining wall, running this way towards Healing Avenue. All 6 of these eyewitnesses went and told their story to the Memphis FBI. All 6 were ignored.
Plot thickens, doesn't it?
Definitely.
Well, let's check it out and see what else you got. Well, so this is the evidence, and this is what you wanted to show us. So what do we have here?
Yeah, this is the actual evidence case, state's evidence case against James Earl Ray. The highlight is the actual 760 Gangmaster 30-06 rifle that was found with James Earl Ray's fingerprints
The
on it. The actual weapon, right. Well, this weapon was finally tested in 1994 when it came out that Dr. King could have been killed as a result of a conspiracy. And number 5 here is the actual shell casing, and number 11 is the actual bullet pulled out of Dr. King's left back shoulder blade.
That's the actual, literally
actual bullet.
And that is the actual bullet, right in this case.
In this case.
That's amazing.
It was preserved all this time, and it does not match the rifle that was recovered at the assassination. So many conspiracy theorists suggest that maybe this weapon was to frame James Earl Ray, who openly admitted to buying 2 weapons right before he came to Memphis, Tennessee. In conclusion with the assassination and looking at a conspiracy, Dr. King was doing some very important things that would have made a lot of people extra angry, and probably the most important was his opposition to the war in Vietnam. And with conspiracy theories connecting President Kennedy's murder to Dr. King's murder, along with Senator Robert F. Kennedy's murder, all 3 men were completely emphatically against the war in Vietnam. Is it a coincidence that all 3 men were assassinated 5 years apart? Robert Kennedy and Martin Luther King were killed exceptionally 2 months apart from each other. Lone gunmen rarely use rifles. If we look at the history of political assassinations, Abraham Lincoln, President James Garfield, William McKinley, Senator Kennedy were all shot with pistols. But the only 2 assassinations that flirt with the act of conspiracy are President John F. Kennedy and Martin Luther King, saying that a lone nut fires a high-powered rifle from a tall office building, murdering both men. Is it a coincidence or not?
Great, but this was definitely food for thought, wasn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
Makes you
definitely.
think.
It's a very, very highlight to talk about. Everybody thinks about Dr. King being assassinated and the very much impact that it had, but who would have wanted to do this and why?
So this brings us to the end of our tour. I mean, there's so much more here than what we've seen, but this is kind of the future, right?
Right. This room goes into the shift from civil rights to human rights. It talks about women's rights, all different rights for all different people outside of the race movement, from 1970s all the way to present day 2013.
Right on. And this is something, that what Dr. King would have probably advocated, I'm sure.
Yeah, the thing that Dr. King said in his dream is actually living out to what we're doing today. Everyone is able to go to school, right to vote, exercising all their citizenship and constitutional rights that our forefathers gave in 1776.
Well, that's part of the dream that he talked about, right?
Yeah, this is the dream that Dr. King was talking about. All these people are having the right to vote, having the right to an education, and being able to exercise their constitutional rights that our forefathers gave in 1776.
That's right. Inalienable rights for all men, right?
All men.
So it's moving forward, and we got a little bit to do.
Yep.
But guess what? If we don't remember the past, and that's what this is all about, we can't have a bright future, can we?
Right. In order to know where you're going, you have to know where you've been.
That's right. Well, thank you so much for being with us here today. And until next time, just remember to enjoy.
Thanks, everybody. Um, Nicole, do you want to start with some questions? Do you want me to start?
It doesn't matter. Does anybody have any thoughts on the video, or did anybody learn anything that they may not have known?
Dan,
Health video. He knew a lot of information. It was really nice to hear. He was very passionate about a lot of the information he was providing. So it was a really nice video to watch.
Kara?
Hi. I didn't know like the connection to the Vietnam War, but also one thing that really I appreciated, like at the end, it like moved from civil rights to like human rights in general. I thought that was really important. I wish they touched base a little bit more on that, but
we're
that was
gonna
nice.
yeah, I was so glad that it ended there too. We're having Bob Fleischner come next week, so I'll give a little plug for that, but we're having him come next week, and he is actually going to do an hour-long presentation about the connection between civil rights and disability rights and human rights. So we're going to have a chance to dive into exactly that. So thanks for bringing that up.
Sarah?
I honestly, I love this whole video and I love this whole celebration, but I wish that I had learned all this when I was younger. I wish that it had been spoken about to this extent when I was in school, because I certainly don't remember all of that information being taught to me. And honestly, I have a 13-year-old and I don't even know that all of this is being taught in school now. So was very eye-opening for me.
Is there anyone else who has anything to add? George?
Yes, hi. Showing my age, but it was a time when I was in my teens when Martin Luther King was shot. And it was a sort of a very, very horrible period when uh, he was assassinated, as well as Bobby Kennedy, and so it was uh, the response to Martin Luther King's assassination was profound. His cities burned. Um, Many people died during the riots. There was there were a couple of incredible incidents of peace. Bobby Kennedy actually, I forget where he was, but he settled people down, and created peace in one city. James Brown was playing in Boston that night, and it was because of his words. There was no sort of rioting in Boston, or limited rioting in Boston, as he asked for peace. It was the 60s. I think a lot of people know and have heard about what went on in the 60s. There was a real strong connection between Martin Luther King's civil rights and the Vietnam War. As there was a lot of protests against the war at that time, that as well as for civil rights. Um, a it was a profound change in the way America looked at itself.
I think I just want to echo a few things that people said. One, I also agree that the tour guide really made this video feel so engaging, and I really appreciate being able to see a museum that I've never been to, and maybe I hope to visit someday, but I don't have it on my agenda in the next couple years as much as I would love to. And so to be able to kind of be taken on a tour as though we were there, I just really appreciate the kind of moment that we're all taking together to kind of go on this tour together. And then as if we're then after our tour kind of have this discussion and debrief about what we saw. And what there's a lot of things that struck me, and I agree. I didn't know so much of this, and I I think what we see happening a lot of times, whether it's in school or on social media, and what I feel like we are doing differently kind of behind the scenes here at Nonotuck is, um, lots of quotes being shared, lots of snippets of Martin Luther King without this kind of like deeper dive to really understand both the history of it and then also Martin Luther King's philosophy, which we'll get into in a little bit shortly. And so I'm just feeling very appreciative that we are taking that time together to kind of like go deeper, to re-educate ourselves, or I can speak for myself, to re-educate myself, and to have a better understanding. And one of the things that I'm just kind of struck with, that I was thinking about living during that time and having I mean, these assassinations of these huge people take place. And I know you hear a lot right now, and I fall into it too, of being like, because the time that we're living in right now does feel scary and does feel like overwhelming, and again, I'm speaking for myself, and can feel like so much, but I think it feels very important to me right now to connect to these points of history and be like, that also was a really hard, scary time, and like we got through and we grew, right? Like, and I don't know, it's just I'm feeling like this feels really important to be connecting to the history of things in this moment.
Can I ask one more question? For those people who may have commented or not commented, in terms of your upbringing and not knowing about this part of history in terms of Black history, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, whoever, do you think in any way that knowing that history back then may have, how do you think it may have shaped your thought process, like now as an adult, or even back then as a teenager or as a child, in terms of the oppression that took place? Grayson?
Yeah, I think that it's a really good question. And I think that a lot of what I personally learned as someone who was not directly affected by discrimination and racism was that in a lot of ways, Martin Luther King kind of like fixed racism, right? And then post MLK, it was like in a lot of ways, oh, there's really nothing. I mean, there's still some things here and there, but he really made so many leaps that, we're in a good place now and all people are created equal. And so I think that in a lot of ways it was just like kind of romanticized that era, um and that it was kind of just left at that, at least, and so I think again, this is why we do this. This is why it's so important to look at the big picture of things. It really shocks me too that you know how recent all of this was, and how the ripple effect you can still feel in so many ways. I just looked up, just out of curiosity, how old Ruby Bridges is, and she's only 69 years old. You know what I mean? And that's mind blowing to me. So I think having these kind of conversations, it always helps, like I said, someone who has not been directly affected or impacted by discrimination in this way, put a bigger picture and perspective, paints a bigger picture for me. So I'm grateful for it.
Thank you, Grayson. The vet?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, watching this video, it come to my mind how I try to echo with the guy was presenting the what happened. He keep on echoing about to know where you're going, you have to know where you've been, and I'm just so appreciative of everything that all those leaders have done and what the struggle. And I know the struggle is still going on. It's really by me coming from a diverse background and seeing what is still going through. You might not see it here, and it's always affect me. And I'm saying, how long have we been fighting to try to install justice and equality? But humans are still making the same mistake over and over. It might not be visible here as other part of the world, but these things are still going. It's like, when is the human in the psychological state of mind are going to learn from the mistake from the past and try to come together. And to quote Martin Luther King again, he said, injustice everywhere, uh, injustice everywhere is a threat, to justice. Uh, no, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And we see how it's affecting us. You know, who will imagine that something happening in maybe Sudan or most recently, and now people are being aware and they didn't understand. I heard a lot of Americans like, why is the war in here is affecting the cost of goods here in America? And I say, yeah, even the little kids are being killed in Sudan, is affecting you. Even you might not feel it directly, but you at some point you're going to feel it. And I'm just grateful for all those leaders. And I know a lot of more other than, I know we're talking about Martin Luther King, but like even at now, as we speak, a lot of Black leaders are being assassinated for trying to seek justice or equity or fairness. And I just like, okay, the fight is still have to continue and we have to be part of the solution and keep on reflecting on this and teaching our kids at home. Even if they're not doing that at school, will probably be a good path to ever reach where we need to be. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Dan?
Hey, everyone. Vivette, I think that's really well said, and I'm glad that you added that because I feel very similarly. One of the things that was really kind of bothering me during the video presentation was the person who was kind of facilitating, the walkthrough, with the person who worked in the museum. Just some of the trite commentary was really annoying given the context of what we were looking at, like, oh, we've still got a little bit of work, we got a bit to go, and doesn't even touch it. And I was really annoyed by that because, Vivette, to your point, there's so much that's actively happening right now. And in my history, in my mind, I just see kind of this seamless progression to the present, where right now there's this kind of precipitous drop off and what's I don't know if I'm overstating it or not, but the sanity of people right now, the division that is evolving. I think there has been a lot of progress. There's been a lot of growth and a lot of increased awareness, but there's so much division. There's so much hatred that's still growing. People are getting emboldened in really frightening ways that I worry about with the election coming up, the increase in violence that's going to happen, both, racially, politically. It's all connected, economically. It's a scary time. And I have a friend who, he was an African American preacher. I remember some years ago being in a bar with him. He was a neighborhood bar. I used to shoot a lot of pool back then, and he came in, and there was another guy from the neighborhood who came in who was just, rough as could be, had a reputation for being a bit of a badass. And over the course of the evening, it came out that he was actually practicing his assassination, that he actually had him in the crosshairs of his gun through a window in his house. And, he said he came to his senses. He had learned a lot. You think, this is in my safe little world, hearing about this. And it was devastating for me to hear this exchange between these two in a bar and not knowing where this was going to go. And I remember my friend just reached out and he just embraced him. And it was such a moment, and I to this day, I don't get where, how this guy has that extra gear to go that deep in his love for somebody else, to be able to reach out to somebody who actually had him in the crosshairs of his scope out in Montague, Massachusetts, one day in the 90s. It just blows me away, but a lot of that is still alive and well, and it scares me. you know, and seeing this kind of a graphic presentation of Dr. King's life rather than everything he was working for, but everyone who was working against him, was really sobering to me. Yeah, yeah, it's had quite an impact.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Dan.
Janelle, do you want to go to the next video?
Yeah, I think that's good. And Dan, it kind of touches on what you said about how somebody could hold that place of love and reach that place of love um, when somebody else is taking violence against them. And we're going to hear Martin Luther King speak to that a little bit right now. So.
Mm.
At Liberty Mutual, we believe progress happens when people feel secure. That's why we exist to help people embrace today and pursue tomorrow.
Liberty, 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 liberty.
Liberty Mutual Insurance is a proud sponsor of American Experience.
Malcolm X, one of the most articulate exponents of the black Muslim philosophy, has said of your movement and your philosophy that it plays into the hands of the white oppressors, that they are happy to hear you talk about love for the oppressor because this disarms the Negro and fits into the stereotype of the Negro as a meek, turning the other cheek sort of creature. Would you care to comment on Mr. X's beliefs?
Well, I don't think of love as, in this context, as emotional bosh. I don't think of it as a weak force. But I think of love as something strong and that organizes itself into powerful direct action. This is what I tried to teach in the struggle in the South, that we are not engaged in a struggle that means we sit down and do nothing. That there's a great deal of difference between non-resistance to evil and non-violent resistance. Non-resistance leaves you in a state of stagnant passivity and deadened complacency, wherein non-violent resistance means that you do resist in a very strong and determined manner. And I think some of the criticisms of nonviolence, or some of the critics, fail to realize that we are talking about something very strong, and they confuse non-resistance with nonviolent resistance.
He goes beyond that in some of the things I've heard him say that this is deliberately your philosophy of love of the oppressor, which he identifies completely with the nonviolent movement, he says, is this philosophy and this movement are actually encouraged by whites because it makes them comfortable. It makes them believe that Negroes are meek, supine creatures.
Well, I don't think that's true. If anyone has ever lived with a nonviolent movement in the South, from Montgomery on through the Freedom Rides and through the sit-in movement and the recent Birmingham movement, and see the reactions of many of the extremists and reactionaries in the white community, he wouldn't say that this movement or this philosophy makes them comfortable. I think it arouses a sense of shame within them often, in many instances. I think it does something to touch the conscience and establish a sense of guilt. Now, so often people respond to guilt by engaging more in the guilt-evoking act in an attempt to drown the sense of guilt. But this approach certainly doesn't make the white man feel comfortable. I think it does the other thing. It disturbs this conscience, and it disturbs this sense of contentment that he's had.
James Baldwin raises still another point about the whole nonviolent position and approach. He does not reject it in the ways that Malcolm X does, but he raises the question of whether it will be possible to contain the Negro people within this framework of nonviolence if we continue to have more of the kinds of demonstrations that we had in Birmingham.
Well, I think these brutal methods used by the Birmingham police force and other police forces will naturally arouse the eye of Negroes, and I think there is the danger that some will be so aroused that they will retaliate with violence. I think, though, that we can be sure that the vast majority of Negroes who engage in the demonstrations and who understand the nonviolent philosophy will be able to face dogs and all of the other brutal methods that are used without retaliating with violence, because they understand that one of the first principles of nonviolence is a willingness to be the recipient of violence while never inflicting violence upon another. And none of the demonstrators in Birmingham engaged in aggressive or retaliatory violence. It was always someone on the sideline who had never been in the demonstrations and probably not in the mass meetings and had never been in a nonviolent workshop. So I think it will depend on the extent to which we can extend the teaching of the philosophy of nonviolence to the larger community rather than those who are engaged in the demonstrations.
Well, how do you maintain this type of discipline, control, and dignity?
We do a great deal in terms of teaching both the theoretical aspects of nonviolence as well as the practical application. We even have courses where we go through the experience of being roughed up. And this kind of sociodrama has proved to be very helpful in preparing those who are engaged in demonstrations. The other thing is...
Does this even include the children?
Yes, it includes the children. In Birmingham, where we had several young we had some as young as 7 years old to participate in the demonstrations, and they were in the workshops. In fact, none of them went out for a march. None of them engaged in any of the demonstrations before going through this kind of teaching session. So that through this method, we're able to get the meaning of nonviolence over. And I think there is a contagious quality in a movement like this when everybody talks about nonviolence and being faithful to it and being dignified in your resistance. It tends to get over to the larger group because this becomes a part of the vocabulary of the movement.
What is the relationship between your movement and such organizations as the NAACP, CORE, and the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee? They're separate organizations,
yes.
But do you work together?
Yes, we do. As you say, each of these organizations is autonomous, but we work together in many, many ways. Last year, we started a voter registration drive, an intensified voter registration drive, and all of the organizations are working together. Sometimes 2 or 3 are working together in the same community. The same thing is true with our direct action programs. In Birmingham, we had the support of SNCC and CORE and the NAACP. CORE sent some of its staff members in to assist us, and SNCC sent some of its staff members. Roy Wilkins came down to speak in one of the mass meetings and to make it clear that even though the NAACP cannot operate in Alabama, we had the support of the NAACP, so that we are all working together on in a very significant way, and we are doing even more in the days ahead to coordinate.
Is there any
our efforts.
machinery for coordination actually exists now?
Well, we have had a sort of coordinating council where we get together as often as possible. Of course, we get involved in many of our programs in the various areas and can't make as many of these meetings as we would like, but we often come together, I mean, the heads of all of these organizations, to try to coordinate our various efforts.
What about the federal government? Have you made any direct appeal?
I think Mr. Kennedy has done some significant things in civil rights, but I do not feel that he has yet given the leadership that the enormity of the problem demands.
By Mr. Kennedy now, do you mean the president or
yes,
the Attorney
I'm
General?
speaking now of the president, mainly. And I would include the Attorney General. I think both of these men are men of genuine goodwill, but I think they must understand more about the depths and dimensions of the problem. And I think there is a necessity now to see the urgency of the moment. There isn't a lot of time. Time is running out, and the Negro is making it palpably clear that he wants all of his rights, that he wants them here, and that he wants them now.
Malcolm X.
Anyone want to share initial reflections or reactions to that video? Dad, go ahead.
Want me to start?
Yeah, please. Thank you.
Okay. I could listen to him all day. He's just, he's incredibly articulate, extremely bright. He's, his speech is one of just, it's almost hypnotic in the way he talks. And it's so, and that's all one thing, but the other thing is so powerful. And it comes from this, this deep, almost incredibly human part of him that few, if any, few of the human race are able to sort of reach. It's just a remarkable man. It's really incredible. Now, it's really interesting around Malcolm X. Malcolm X, who at that particular moment in time was, obviously spoke about, felt as though the nonviolence movement and Dr. King's movement wasn't getting it the way that they thought it. Just towards the end of his life, he actually turned away from the brand of Islam that he was in and went to, I think it was Sunni Islam, which instead of blaming the lot on sort of white racism, it blamed it off a lot and basically on racism itself. And it's a question of whether or not he was assassinated by the Nation of Islam, or whether or not it could have been government. There's some sort of speculation that it was the government or the FBI or whatever, or a combination of both. So, but anyway, it's interesting that Malcolm X actually, at the end of his life, was moving towards Malcolm X as opposed to where he was then. But anyway, it's just amazing what he has to say and how he says it.
Thank you. Nicole?
So I just wanted to say that there were a couple of words that he used that kind of stuck out to me in terms of, like, this is a man who was arrested multiple times. His house was set on fire. He was stabbed and all of these things. And the process of the nonviolent approach that he was using, and he said, if we can get them to have shame or some kind of guilt or the disruption of their conscience, maybe we can make a change. And I feel like and I don't know, and I'm curious if there's like research on this, but um, if the people are a little bit older that he's trying to target, maybe they're too stuck in their ways to realize the error of their ways, or to have guilt or shame or anything that they are doing. I think it was probably more applicable to maybe their children or their grandchildren who were able to witness it over a time. So I'm trying to figure out like how much of that really worked in terms of providing change using that approach. Um, I mean, you can't have like, I don't know. That's just my thought process on it, like for his approach, what he was trying to do. Because I think of like a bully, right? Kids a bully in school, and they may not realize until they're much older or may feel guilty or shameful about the acts that they've done, and like and if they did, what were they doing to make change? And that's what I wanted to.
Thanks, Nicole. Diane.
Thanks, Janelle. He said in what we just watched, and it really jumped out at me, love organizes itself into powerful direct action. That just it's so intelligent, such an intelligent man. And it reminded me of so back in the day, now I'm dating myself, in college, I took a community organizing class where we studied some of the great community organizers, Saul Alinsky, Dorothy Day. We researched and read a lot of Dr. King's speeches, and one of my favorite speech was the drum major instinct that he gave 2 months before he was assassinated. And he had such a powerful message. Basically, the drum major instinct, meaning everybody has it. They have the need to be powerful or be a leader. But what's important about the drum major instinct is that we're harnessing that power and making it for good, using it for good. And so his mentioning that reminded me of that speech and took me back to those days. But just making sure that we're using that drum major instinct to for the benefit of others, to a servant leadership style. And yeah, I certainly learned a lot from all of his speeches, but that one just really stood out.
Thanks, Diane. Maybe we can maybe we can find that speech somewhere and share it.
Sure.
Vivette.
Yeah, thank you again. I want to go from the response, what Reverend Martin Luther King was saying, and take the other approach for other leaders that around the world who have the same approach of nonviolence and preaching love. Uh, Nicole was asking if that was working and stuff. Yeah, it did work because we are here now, right? And we see we see where we were back then and now where we are now. And about Gandhi in Africa, and that time period was about when Africa is always trying to fight to have independence, even though at this time the independence is not how we have several leaders like Kwame Nkrumah, Patrice Lumumba, Chuja Puemi. A lot of people in Africa was at the same period trying to do, and somewhere going to the United Nations, even though where they were not a nation at the time, trying to some people were choosing the non-violence approach, and some people were saying, no, we have to retaliate with violence to get what we want. But we come to realize, and many studies has proved that violence doesn't get you the result that you want to achieve. And by getting people to understand and know each other and keep on preaching that love continuously, we eventually get where we want to be without causing a lot of human loss. You see the recent case of Nelson Mandela, peace to his soul. He has been in jail for 27 years, but he was still teaching the nonviolence, and he has to divorce from his wife because his wife at some point couldn't take it, and she organized people to go and kill people. And she said, no, that's not what I'm about. And he separated from that woman. And that was his love to get somebody else who have the same idea as him. And this morning when I was driving to work, and I was listening to a radio that I usually listen when I'm in my car. It's called K-Love. And these people were talking about a Black man in the South who was successful to invite some KKK group to his house to take coffee every day. And many of them were so overwhelmed by the love the guy was showing to them, despite what they have been doing, that people just run away because there were too much love that was shown. And then some people keep on coming and they decided to change from their way. And I'm loving the fact that he said that they start teaching the children about the nonviolence approach, even though they were not physically going to the march and stuff. But when I listened to other documentary in the past where people were saying, oh, with the slavery, it's just the waiting were, and we couldn't do anything. But we realized that the impact has to come from children. When you children are taught at a younger age, and they can transform society by what they are learning as young as soon as they were born. Some people just watch things and say, oh, this is the way things are, we don't have to change them. You know, they accept it. But some people are questioning, like, why is it this way? Why shouldn't be this and this way? And those are the people who are the leader, like Martin Luther King. And I think that his approach was just amazing. You know, it's like you don't really achieve anything by violence. You just cause chaos. So that's my little contribution about that.
Thank you. Thank you, Vivette. Yeah, and one of the things that has kind of come up as we've talked about this, and Nicole asked that great question about, if you felt like you didn't learn about a lot of this, like growing up, like what, where were the holes and what did that look like? And what's coming to me as we talk through a lot of this is that something I've been thinking about in my own parenting, um, is that there's a line between being developmentally appropriate with children, which I'm all for, but I have started realizing that in my own life and in my own parenting, I've been shielding my daughter, who's in kindergarten now, from stories that have things that she's actually seen in her own life. So, like, she has, had a death in the family, and I cringe when there's like a death in a movie or a story. And then I was like, wait, she actually needs to see that in developmentally appropriate stories so she can understand. And then that way, as we get older, it's laying the groundwork, and we can have another developmentally appropriate conversation about it. And then as she gets older, we can have a different conversation. And I think what has happened, or what I see happening, because she did come home talking about Martin Luther King last week in a developmentally appropriate way, right? Which is a bit romanticized, which in kindergarten, I don't know, maybe that's right in kindergarten. But my mental note was, it's my job to make sure when I feel like she is of an age that I'm having these conversations with her, right? And that I'm not shielding her, because she's going to see it in her own life. And so we need to be having these conversations at home. Like, we're reading Charlotte's Web right now, even though there's a lot of death in it, but she's seeing that in her life. So she needs to see it reflected in story and in education and all these other ways. So I think what we're doing here is like the grown-up version of that. Like, we're taking, at a developmentally appropriate point, we're all adults here, and we're able to have these adult conversations. But I think many of us, and myself included, feel like I missed out on in this gap between the romanticization of it and everything else. And so I think we're unpacking a lot of that now. So, Nicole.
Okay, I'll be quick because I know we have to go. But that's what I mean. Like, in terms of what he was saying, that they were going to feel guilt and shame, and that was his hopes. My thought process was not the violent approach, but just like you said, the man invited the KKK. I think it comes from a place of understanding and ignorance, because if you don't know somebody and then this is just being taught to you, you're going to run with it. So, like, for instance, if I'm petrified of dogs, And my whole life, I've been taught that dogs are evil, dogs are evil. And then I finally meet a nice dog and a dog owner who shows me a different way. Then I'm going to be like, okay, maybe all dogs are not bad. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? So that was my rationale behind it. And then secondly, Janelle, I wanted to ask you, just because you brought this up, how difficult is it for you to teach your children, and other people are free to answer as well, you to teach your children about racism as a white person? Because that's going to bring a lot of white people into a negative light. And sometimes we don't want to expose ourselves. So how difficult is that for you?
It's a great question. And just for anybody that needs to leave, I totally understand. And also I'm here to like feel like we come to some closure on this. So yeah, I've been but and this is a great time to be asking this question because I've been really sitting with that. And Meadow came home the other day, and she had this like nice little scholastic pamphlet and had a timeline of Martin Luther King, and she told me, um, Mom, I would have been a nice white person. Like I would have been one of the nice white people, right? And in the moment, like, we were doing stuff and all this stuff, and I was like, okay, I had a moment later. I was like, we're gonna, need to look back to that and like, what does that mean to you, Meadow? Like to be one of the nice people. And I think what my approach is right now is to, because of her age, is to really kind of ask her questions and like, and really kind of unpack it with her, and to approach it from a place of like curiosity together, so that it doesn't feel like preachy, and it doesn't feel like I'm um painting, embedding her with some kind of guilt or shame that's not necessarily hers to carry at 5 years old, right? But really kind of, like I said, finding ways to have developmentally age appropriate discussions from it, and that we are laying a groundwork that we can continue to follow up on as she grows. But I think it takes a lot of unpacking as a parent to have those discussions, because you have to understand, you have to have your own beliefs formed to know what you want to pass on. And I've met that a lot in parenting. Like I spoke about, she's seen like the death of a loved one and the death of a pet. And I had to be like, oh my gosh, well, what do I actually believe and what do I want to impart on my children for them to carry forward with them? And so I think that it is hard, but because the reason I think it's hard is because I find, we have to really do our own work to feel like we can speak about it. And that is hard work, but it is really important work. And so much of what we're again doing here together feels like it's helping me inform my own views to be able to have those conversations with my children. Does that answer your question?
No, it does answer my question. I think that that's great. And another reason why I asked, if Yvette, you can go on and be really quickly, is because my mom, she actually went to see a caregiver, and this caregiver had Christmas cards, right? So she goes, "Oh, I have these Christmas cards for you because I can't use them. I was planning on sending them out next year, but I can't use them." And she says, "Why?" And she says, "Oh, it has a black Santa Claus on it." So she so she's like, "Well, you don't why wouldn't you pass it out?" And she goes, "Oh, well, the people that I'm giving it to, they wouldn't be fond of that." So it was almost like the ignorance behind it, and it could have been such a anyways, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah. Um, we have a couple, like I said, I'm happy to let this go over. So anybody that needs to leave can leave, but I want people to have space to share. So Vivette, and then I see Carla's hand raised as well.
Yeah, I just have to be quick. What I'm going to say is that all of us, we have a positive and negative trait in us. And usually, like I said, I have like a lot of siblings, like maybe more than 25 siblings. But we come with our each trait, and like some have more empathy than others. We were raised by the same parents, but it's kind of weird because like when I look me growing up with my sibling and stuff, I have my sibling, they're mean, and I'm like, where do you get that? And they're like so sometimes judgmental and see somebody, oh, this person is just, and it's like, whatever that happened to you, oh, it won't happen to one of your children or your child. It's like, oh, it's not going to happen to me, but it will happen to my child. That will be my child, and I don't care. And I'm wondering, like, where do you get that from? And I'm thinking that each of us, we are born with those traits, and then it depends how we decided to nurture them from when we are a child. Like if you want to nurture the positive trait, because like say, there's always a battle between the evil and the good. And sometimes you want to do some things like you have your inner, I don't know, like inner clock or whatever who telling you that don't do this, don't do this, and another's like do this, do this. And it depends how in whatever possibility you need to channel. And some people see that this is wrong, and they say no, this is really wrong. And some people say, oh, it's wrong, but I'm not going to do anything about that. And you see all the show that they show on TV, and what will you do the right thing? And from that, you can get a sense of what human beings are. Some are just afraid, like, oh, I don't want to be involved. I don't want to be part of this. And I really guess that in the area of Martin Luther King, when he was fighting, people was like, oh, where is he going to go with this fight? And some people were really maybe ally with the people who are like, oh, they deserve it. You know, we need to treat them that way. So it's something that logically we cannot really like explain, and I'm sure that we have a lot of study in the psychology, like kids are born and then you ask them to choose like between these two dolls, which one is the best, and most of the kids choose the white doll. Why would that happen? Even if they were not exposed to that, like you go to Africa where a kids in the remote village, they have not seen, they have not even seen a white person in their entire life, and then you bring a white doll before the only white doll, and they're like, oh, why would I choose this specific one and not choose something different? Which one is the best? And this, so I think that in our sense, we have to choose like kids nurture, and they ask questions when they come to us to ask questions, and because they want guidance. And sometimes I see a lot of parents like, oh, go there. They don't want to answer, but those are conversations that you have to have with your kids to nurture them in the right path. And some kids are afraid when they come and say, oh, mommy, I saw my friend do this to that person, and I think they shouldn't have done that. And the mother was like, oh, it's none of your business. Don't mind about that. But if you tell your kids from the get-go, like, yeah, that was wrong, and I'm glad that you speak, or do you report to the teacher? And the kids came, yeah, I did report to the teacher. And then you see where the kids is trying to get the quality of leadership and goodness in them. You have to bring that goodness about the person. That's all I have to add in these things. Sorry, I didn't mean to be too long.
No, thank you, Vivette. Carla.
I don't have much to add, but I will say that I used to have quite a strained relationship with the word resistance and trying to understand what that really meant. And my upbringing and the relationships that I've had and built with people around me, and my love for social justice, and in any way, in any capacity that I can assist in whichever way, right? But also understanding that I don't know all the answers, and that I'm probably never going to know all the answers. But I always keep it as a forefront in my mind. I don't have kids, so I'm not able to challenge them, right? But I challenge my peers, and I challenge the people that are around me, and I allow them to challenge me and my thoughts, and think about how, even though my issues may not be their issues or their issues may not be mine, we have a middle ground that we can meet of human rights, and how we can work together to actually come to a place of maybe not happiness, right? But some place where we can have some middle ground. That's all.
Thanks, Carla. Nicole, do you have anything that you want to end on? Any notes?
Yes, thank you everyone for attending. I think these conversations are great, and I'm glad everybody feels comfortable enough to contribute to the conversation. And even if you don't contribute to the conversation, I'm glad that you can just make the conversation and be here. Shameless plug. I will say, some of you are repeat offenders in this group, and I would love it, love it, love it if you would volunteer to send me a short video on why you like attending these things, what you hoped, what you gain out of it, maybe what you would want to see in the future. And all I ask is that you hold your camera horizontally, and it doesn't have to be long. I mean, if it's 30 seconds, 60 seconds, I will take it because I do want to compile a video to share with our agency and other people who may not come to these events. So
Thank you, Nicole. Yeah, thank you everybody so much for attending. This was really, really great. And yeah, join us next week. Bob, like I said, Bob Fleischner is going to be coming in to speak from his, historical and legal perspective about the connection between civil rights and disability rights, which impact all of us here at Nonotuck. And then we're going to be this our Martin Luther King Day celebration often feels to me like a kickoff to Black History Month, which is in February. So stay tuned to hear what we have going on for that. And I hope you all have a really great day. Take care.
Thank you.